Thank you, Rosa, for having me here in Durham, North Carolina. Tell me, how did you get to the US and how long have you been here?
It's a pretty long story. My then boyfriend was in his last year in veterinary school in Belgium and decided that he wanted to study in the United States. So in order for both of us to be able to come here, we had to get married. So we got married, and the next year in 1971, we moved to the United States, Madison, Wisconsin, where he went to graduate school. That would be about 45 years now.
45 years in the US, that's a long time. What is your favorite thing about living in the US?
My favorite things living in the US actually changed over time. So when we first came here, the thing that I really liked was so easy to move here.
And 45 years after, what's your favorite thing about the US?
It's a lot of nature here still, a lot of birds. My husband, we're both birders. We like nature. I like gardening. And then all these flowers come from my garden, for example. I can be very busy and I can be very intense, my work and everything else. But once I get out of my work and drive away from the city, I just like to feel all the stress get out of my body.
So nature plays a big part in your life.
Yes.
Since you went back to Belgium frequently, you saw the country change, but you also saw the United States change. Over the last 45 years, what are the biggest changes you saw?
Wisconsin, Madison in those days was a very liberal place to live. Whereas when I came from Belgium, in Belgium, for example, when I got married, I had just started working and I had opened up my own bank account. And then I get married, and then my husband all of a sudden has to sign that I can keep my bank account. They had this kind of old-fashioned laws in Belgium, which after we left changed. So over the years when I went back, I found actually Belgium became actually more progressive. For example, gay and lesbians could also get married in Belgium, which here, when it was a couple of weeks ago that the Supreme Court actually approved of it. So those things were and also it went from a very Catholic country to non-religious, it's part of their culture, but not necessarily part of their daily lives. But in the United States, it seems like religion, or the perception of religion, seems to influence everything. And I think that's wrong. Your religion or your spiritual life should be something that it's your own.
Throughout your life, you have lived in several countries and you have had quite a career in public health and women and motherhood health. Can you tell me a little bit more about that part of your life?
I applied for this job at with a company was called, not an organization, called International Fertility Research Institute. They opened up an office in Nairobi, a regional office. So I moved to Nairobi. It must have been 1993.
What was your main responsibilities?
So it was basically setting up prevention programs, teaching people about how HIV/AIDS was transmitted, how they could protect themselves, either having no sex, using condoms, and so that was kind of the original project. And then after 5 years, I came back to the United States. I stayed with FHI, I came back and worked on their, they had a new project that was in the beginning of the antiretrovirals, as we call ART. I worked with universities to test drugs and see how well they work. So that was like 3 years. They opened up more offices and they called me and said, would you be interested in moving to Namibia and set up the office here and do it? And I kind of looked at where that country was and I go like, looks pretty nice. So I moved to Namibia and I lived there for 7 years. We rebuilt some of the hospitals. We provided integrated services instead of standalone. Some people go for testing, then they're told to go somewhere else for counseling and somewhere else for treatment. So what we did an integrated VCT, PMTCT, ART program. So if a woman came in for antenatal care and she was found to be HIV positive and pregnant, she would kind of go in the service all the way through and then be followed. So that was basically what I did for about 7 years. So then I came back in 2007, back to FHI, because I worked there for 32 years, and they had a new family planning project they needed the deputy director for. And I was proposed to the US government, and we won the project. And eventually my husband quit his job and retired, and I was the one that worked for 10 more years. He was the one with the doctor's degree and the PhD and the master's degree.
And he ended up retiring, and you ended
Yeah,
up...
and I ended up working and making more money than he ever did.
That's an accomplishment per se.
Yeah, right.
You have lived in 4 countries and you have traveled all around the world for many, many years. What did that teach you?
What I learned in Africa, it's you have to learn to appreciate people, what they can do, and they may do things different than we do. That's their life, that's where they live. They know how their society functions. You have to be very polite and wait and have a lot of patience. Or when you go to a village, you have to go and greet the head man. I've even met a king, King Takopi, and I had to eat this nice little fried worms. They're called mopani worms. And all I could think was, oh my God, if I'm going to bite in this, it's going to have squeeze, yucky. But it was nice and fried and dry, so they were actually not that bad. So I ate a few of mopani worms.
If you had any advice to give to a fellow Belgian moving to the US, or in your case anywhere, what would that be?
I think when people move from one country to another, what they need to understand is you don't have to lose your values, you don't have to give up your language or your religion or something, but I think you also have to understand when you move to another country, you have to fit in there, and you can't just bring everything with you. In Flemish, they would say aanpassen, you have to learn to appreciate what is here, and give up something, it's like they say, what was it, Jean-Paul Sartre who said, partir c'est mourir un peu. So wherever I ever lived in my life, each time when you leave something behind which you will never have again.
Thank you so much, Rose, for your time.
You're most welcome, Severine. It was very, very nice talking to you.
It was very, very nice talking to you too.
Yes, we can go on with saying very, very, very nice.